Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, very important episode because we will discuss on energy sector. You know that last day we bring head of energy ministries for training and development, Mr. Rafiqul Islam. We want to try through this process. We actually try to understand the strategy policy of developing nations, and through this process we want to advise the developing nation better solution and better strategy. Yes, World Talent Economy Forum already collaborate with an energy ministry of Bangladesh, energy and mineral resources. Hopefully we will train 55,000 employees, and definitely we will uplift the community through Industry 4.0 training. We have our expert panelists for today's sessions, Mr. David Schumacher from Trans Humanist Party, as well as we have our industry expert, Mr. Marshall. First, I want to give chance, Mr. David Schumacher.
Well, hello, everyone. Green energy. I'm very happy to talk on this. I think most people that are watching know about my position as Applied Innovation Director for the Transhumanist Party, which Sharif had mentioned in his introduction. So clearly, science and technology being able to help solve problems for humans, for the planet, obviously, I think that's a great thing. So I'm very happy to talk about the advantages of green energy. But I'm not naive, and I don't expect anybody else to be naive. So we also have to look at where green energy has its shortcomings as well. Those reasons for shortcomings, I'll just talk about very briefly. They're not reasons not to use green energy. They're reasons to keep innovating and to keep pressing forward and to keep using better and cleaner standards. Many times green energy is referred to as clean energy, and I like to make the nuance and say it's cleaner energy, that there is no absolute form of clean energy. I mean, just from the standpoint of using energy, heat is dissipated, for example, which changes things around it. So there's always some minor effect, and it's always a matter of degree. So when we look at cleaner energy, one of the key things on my mind is using that to help in the overall climate crisis, which we find ourselves in. So that's another reason to keep pressing forward, no matter what. So what are the kind of things that I'm talking about with clean energy? I think it's heavily advertised what the advantages of clean energy are. I have solar energy panels on my roof. Probably my next vehicle will be an electric vehicle. I totally am sold on that idea. But there are negative spinoffs from that. What about the chemicals that are used to manufacture and that are involved in those solar panels that are on my roof? What about the life cycle of batteries for vehicles? Wave energy, what effect on the ocean do they have? Once again, these are not reasons not to do clean energy. It's just that we can't relax and say, we've got the problem, let's forget about it, let's move on. We need to continue to innovate. And as always, I want to see that innovation done in the private sector as much as possible. Government, in many cases, needs to lead the way. But when it's done in the private sector, perhaps it can be done more efficiently and can be done with an entrepreneurial spirit, which many times opens us up to possibilities that we wouldn't otherwise see in a more bureaucratic type of environment. So, since green energy, or any energy source for that matter, has pluses and minuses, how do we employ these ideas? And I think we do it by diversification of our energy sources. I think of an analogy would be diversification in a financial portfolio. I have stocks that are more risky. I have stocks that are less risky. I have an overall strategy. I'm a person that not only invests with my money, but also invests with my conscience. Therefore, the companies that I invest in are companies that are committed to going in the same direction that I want to see humanity go. But nevertheless, there's different risks and different rewards that are available. So I spread those out. And I think that's something that we need to consider with with green energy as well. So, having considered that, as I look at developing wind and wave as alternative to fossil fuels and other things, I look for inspiration from current events. And one of the big current events, of course, has been the invasion of Ukraine and aspects that that's had on world energy markets. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but what I want to say is it's making people rethink their use of energy. For example, in Europe is heavily dependent upon Russian oil and gas, especially gas. They decommissioned old nuclear reactors, which was a good thing to do, in my opinion, because that old technology was dangerous, very unclean. It had been developed during a very early period of development. So, yes, it needed to be decommissioned. Their mistake, in my opinion, was not looking at replacement other than just going for a cheaper solution of oil and gas that most of it comes from Russia. Now I'm going to stay out of that war, but I just want to say I want to highlight this as the way decisions were made on the national scale. So taking a step back from that, what can we do differently? Well, they could have looked into developing more wind, more solar, wave energy, as some of the Scandinavian countries are looking at doing. And those are all good things, but you have to look at the time horizon on these and compare those to the time events that we see around climate change. And I think the development, as much as I stress development of new technologies, the development of making those into a good replacement is taking much, much longer than we would like. We're seeing very low percent of energy use by any country in the renewable resources. It's building. That's a good thing. We're going to continue to build it faster, and I do believe it will come along faster as technologies improve. But there's been one technology that's been improving for 30 some years that's been put on the back shelf that I think needs to be taken a look at, and that is an honest look at what's going on in nuclear energy. Now, I'd mentioned the Ukraine war, and one of the things that we think about right away is Chernobyl. There were battles that went on around that, brought Chernobyl back in the spotlight. But once again, this was a very old, very early Soviet-designed reactor that was 30 years ago. Now, let me stop and contrast that just real quickly and say, we're going back to space. When I was a youth, that was one of my big dreams, and seeing Neil Armstrong walk on the moon was great, but it took 50 years before we were in a position to be able to go back to space much more safely and to be able to start taking civilians into space. So we need to look at not the nuclear technology of 30 years ago and make decisions. We need to look at what's going on now, such as the development of creating U-233 from thorium, for example, and what that means as far as chain-controlled nuclear reactions. And we need to look at monitoring equipment, and we need to look at civil engineering design. There has been a lot that's been going on for 30 years. And why should we do that? Because nuclear energy is a much lower producer of carbon dioxide than others, 70% less than coal, which is being pushed back into production because of the Ukraine war. 40 times less than gas, the alternative that much of Europe went to. 4 times less even than solar that's on my roof, and 2 times less than hydroelectric. So there are some good reasons to take a look at these new designs, new safety features, new energy sources, new technologies. Clearly, I'm not saying throw caution to the wind. What I am saying is very cautiously, but very purposely, look at ways that we can use this in our energy portfolio that I talked about before. I'm not talking about using anything exclusively. I'm talking about using everything in right balance. And I'm talking about spreading risks, monitoring those risks as any good investor would do with their financial portfolio, and get in and out of different types of stocks, or in this case, different types of energies as the situation progresses. Now, the so-called elephant in the room about nuclear technology is nuclear waste. And I encourage those that haven't looked into this in some time to look at the new fuel sources in nuclear energy and look at how much less they need to use and how much less radioactive they are overall. Clearly, there are issues that still need to be worked through there, just like there are issues with any energy source, and we need to continue to put effort in these areas and use them appropriately. So those are my opening remarks, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Mr. Marshall, you are from industry and you have experience to develop different energy-related projects. What is your advice? How we can develop better green energy strategy for around the world?
Well, thank you, Sharif. And I think David positioned a lot of the thoughts that a lot of people out there are thinking about properly. It's interesting that he mentioned nuclear energy. It's something that has to be looked at, and I agree with him. But I do believe that there are other sources that are actually much more advanced than nuclear energy, believe it or not. We're involved in that specifically. We have a genset called the Zajac engine that is the only constant torque, constant compression, constant temperature engine in the world. And what it does is it takes any source of fuel and it allows it to combust it 100%. When you look at the combustion of, let's say, any type of diesel engine or internal combustion engine, you look at it from the top down, it looks like a sun with a black ring around it. And the reason the black ring around it is that it's cool. It's not combusting 100%. In fact, that's why catalytic converters were invented, because it creates a lot of pollution. And especially when they went away from lead fuel, it cleaned it up. But still, you've only got a 30% combustion. With a Zajac engine, you have almost 99.9% combustion. And what that does is the amount of NOx coming out of the engine in the genset is at most 18 parts per million NOx. What that means mathematically, that's asymptotic mathematically, meaning it's close to zero. Right now, everybody on this planet that's watching this broadcast, Sharif, is breathing a minimum of 400 parts per million NOx and probably more likely closer to 900 parts per million. And that is, it depends on where you are on the planet and what's going on. If you're in India and they're burning rice hulls, trust me, you're breathing 900 parts per million of NOx. There's no doubt about it. They measured it. What I would like to tie into is the fact that the immediate situation we have on our hands is tied into the climate crisis and the green energy discussion. What do I mean by that? The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, just issued a blog post that said Russia's invasion of its neighbors will likely have a protracted impact on commodities, affecting oil and gas prices more severely this year and food prices well into the next year. And actually, the food crisis and the energy crisis are tied right at the hip, side by side. And we need to acknowledge that. We also need to know that the climate crisis, unless Putin decides to unleash nuclear weapons, that is the existential threat, and it's coming sooner rather than later. On several past broadcasts, I've always talked about the climate clock in New York City at 14th Street, Union Square, not the one at 42nd Street that counts down for New Year's, but the one that's counting down for the climate crisis. And if you look at it, it's imminent. It's not good news. And the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Crisis from the UN, published several reports, but the last report it published just recently in the beginning of April of this year showed that there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that climate clock is ticking down, and it's moving at an exponential logarithmic rate. It's not good for us. The good news is we have the opportunity to make a difference now. So our recommendation from our panel and our side of the team in this effort, and especially through the World Talent Economy Forum, we recommend everybody join forces because time is of the essence and we need all hands on deck, as sailors like to say. And how do we do that? One of the ways we do that is by gathering together and creating the deployment of technology, specifically pyrolysis technology, which is burning in the absence of oxygen, and it's clean, and it takes organic waste and inorganic waste. It takes what is considered waste already and it is already polluting our soils, our air, and our water. We convert that into products that further enhance and reduce environmental impacts. It's possible to do now at scale. Most technologies that are pyrolytic carbon capture and storage systems process about 10 metric tons a day of waste and can only handle organic. We have technology that processes 120 metric tons a day of waste, and instead of converting that into 17% of a material that could reduce more environmental impacts, we convert it to 25 to 30% material. And the rest is thermal energy that can be used for heating, drying, and non-polluting efforts. And also we get out of that what's in Europe is called pyrogas or syngas in the rest of the world. Now, syngas has problems. The problem is it has VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and PAH, polyaromatic hydrocarbons. The good news is the Zajac engine can convert that into clean energy. And when I say, or cleaner energy, as David appropriately pointed out, because it's not 100% clean. But there is no system on the planet that creates clean energy. The only thing that's closest to that is the Zajac engine. At 18 parts per million, that's about as clean as you're going to get right now in the real world. So what we need to do is we need to engage in clean energy and green energy that allows us to take and allow the oil companies and the fuel companies to convert to this type of technology. Why do I say that? They're used to, for the past 200 years, making money hand over fist. I don't think you're going to go to somebody that's been making money that way for 200 years and tell him to make money a different way unless you give them another opportunity to make money. That's what we got to do in one part. On the other part, the ability for people to engage was seen only recently. I'll give you an example. Angela Merkel, fingers have been pointed at her for not seeing and taking Germany out of the entrenchment with Russia and its gas and some of its coal. But however, she became aware of that really only in March of 2020 with the pandemic. Because what happened in March to May of 2020 is that Angela Merkel led the charge. And by the way, she's a physicist by background. A lot of people don't know that. She's a scientist. But she understood immediately that not only was the pandemic going to cause a lot of death and destruction, but also economic destruction, they also recognized that they needed to create a circular economy and that they were going to do a Marshall Plan, not named after me, obviously, but named after George Marshall from World War II, to bring back from the Nazis the Europe and recover it from the Nazi devastation of World War II, along with Japan. So what happened is U.S. bondholders who had put money into the war effort through war bonds were now doing U.S. savings bond, and those U.S. savings bonds were used to bring back Europe and create the European Union. That's where that money came from. So what did Angela Merkel and her colleagues do? They set up a set up of bonds that have been established since 2009, and they said, from now on, we're going to raise 100 trillion euros in climate bonds. Now, guess what? This year, in 2022, we just got a report from the Climate Bond Initiative that they've raised already 3 trillion euros in climate bonds. I don't know about you, but $1 trillion of something is a lot. What can it do for Malaysia? What can it do for the developing world? What can it do for the rest of us? We are going out and acquiring climate bonds from the EU, and the joint ventures are already formed. None of them are in Europe, but we do satisfy the European requirement because we check those boxes by creating our technology and create jobs in Europe. But we can bring jobs those same similar jobs to Malaysia, Pakistan, India, throughout the developing world, sub-Saharan Africa. We can do it in Kenya. We can do it wherever we need to do it, because the technology is here and now, and it needs to be deployed. It needs to be deployed at a scale that is industrial. 500 million euros, let alone a trillion euros. 500 million euros is one climate bond that can create a lot of jobs, a lot of deployment, and a lot of clean energy, and turn waste into environmental impacts, lowering environmental impacts, and at the same time creating green energy for people, and at the same time take the oil and gas companies and show them a way where they can still make their money, but at the same time do it in a non-polluting method, or a less polluting method. I think David said nothing's 100%, and we know that. But the point is, it's a lot better than what you got now, and we need to do it, and we need to do it as quickly as possible. My recommendation in this forum is that we go forward with green energy, or greener energy, as David pointed out, and we need to do it. We have the capabilities to do it here and now. All we need is capital. But if you go out, and I have a friend that was on my board, Brian von Herzen, who works in the oceanic part and just got an X Prize. But as David and I said, X Prize is great, but it won't scale to the point, they're going to give them what, 5 million, maybe 20 million maximum. It's not enough money. You need money to change entire societies, and you need to do it sooner rather than later. So Sharif, my recommendation is everybody join up with the World Talent Economy Forum. Let's band together. Let's go out, educate. We use as our criteria the 17 Sustainability Development Goals, which tie into green energy, which tie into finance, which tie into lowering poverty, which tie into increasing education. As you've announced in the past, you're creating jobs and you're creating educational opportunities for people through the World Talent Economy Forum. It's all tied together. Without the green energy, you're not going to have the education. Without the green energy, you're not going to have food production that is being threatened right now by the Ukraine war. We need to create food subsistence capability in the world, in the developing world, such as Malaysia, such as India, such as Pakistan, such as other parts of Africa. We need to do it now. And the sooner, the better. The money is there. We know after COP26, GFANs came out and said they're committing $130 trillion. Their concern is how they deploy that money. Well, the mechanism is to deploy it through climate bonds, and the climate bonds have stringent taxonomies. Those are rules, as I've said in the past, that tell you that you can't cheat. You can't do greenwashing, which is cheating. You got to be able to do it and allow these legacy products, such as oil and gas, to convert into other methods that allow them to make money, allow the energy to continue to flow, but at the same time not pollute the environment. So that's my take. And again, I ask everyone to band together through Sharif's program, through the World Talent Economy Forum, so we can all band together and get this done sooner rather than later. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Definitely, we want to create more opportunity for this developing world. Mr. Adam, what you want to add, especially when we discuss about green energy and different strategy from developed world and developing world? What is your view?
Thank you, Sharif. So I think green energy is one of those sectors that suffers from a kind of unidirectional bias, where people look to the future, or they wait for research and development advances, emerging innovations, waiting for things to come to us when the time is right and enough tests have been done. I think what would be a good idea would be to look through history as well, at people and their inventions and innovations who may have been covered up, scrubbed out of history for political reasons related to industrial espionage, and corporations and conglomerates that have behaved in unethical ways. Maybe some of them were in cahoots with the black market, so on. Of course, Nikola Tesla is often in the spotlight now, like with the upcoming Tesla project that the World Talent Economic Forum is doing with Dr. Chiok. And Tesla is a great example, a classical example. You could say the quintessential archetype of the genius scientist who was too ahead of his time and was bumped off the road by the likes of Edison, who was a lot more ruthlessly focused on fame and money, arguably. So, of course, it's not just people like Tesla who suffer, who get posthumous recognition. It's also their ideas and the millions of ordinary people who could benefit from these inventions and ideas that are now unfairly labeled as woo or quackery or obsolete. Yes, look to the future, see what is around and available for us to innovate here in the present as well. But maybe the history of science could be a gold mine of new ideas, especially history that is still hidden, deleted. And Tesla is an example, like I said. The hemp industry at the turn of the 20th century is another. And there are books about that now. As the saying goes, there is nothing new under the sun. And it could be that we have, in some ways, actually regressed as a society instead of progressed, or a mixture of the two, which could mean that looking back at history and really diving in deep would be not only a curiosity, but a necessity if we want to survive as a species, or not only survive, but be happy. But on top of all that, Marshall and David have already outlined all of these great ideas that are being researched and rolled out. But of course, you need funding and backing and a reliable team of people to work with to ensure the success of all these amazing technologies. The oil and fossil fuel infrastructure is so extensive and has been for decades. There are still many influential people who will do anything to prevent the disassembling of that infrastructure because it's against their interests and their bank balance. So I think the technical feasibility is there, as we have heard and read, but the roadblocks are political, social, cultural, economic, arguably. So we need innovations in those sectors to match the technological innovations. We need innovations in those spheres to help further incentivizing and cultivating interest in these new green energy developments. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you for your very important remarks. Professor Paul, yes, green energy actually very important. Even this situation we are observing, energy is a major challenging things right now after this war. So what type of uh, like good solutions we can get from this green energy, how it helps to overcome from this challenging situation?
Well, the technology, as others have said, is basically, ready to go. It's really a matter of scalability. It's a matter of mass deployment of systems of all different types of green energy, and it's just a situation where economies of scale are very important, right? The more wind turbines and solar panels that we produce, and the more we deploy, the cheaper the deployment costs are and the manufacturing costs are. And green energy has been growing, at exponential rates for quite a while, but it still has a long way to go to displace fossil fuel infrastructure. So the subsidies to fossil fuels and are still allowing, the more money to be going into fossil fuel development, new sources, etc. That money is still far exceeding what's going into green energy, and the growth of the fossil fuel energy production is still exceeding that of green energy. So we need to look at this honestly and to declare more climate emergencies. And I think we need to really talk about the crisis, the threats, the risks to human civilization more. I think governments need to communicate those risks to their in their respective countries to the public, because then it makes it very easy for the public to demand and for the government to follow up on looking at this scalability and treating it on a war footing. We do need Marshall type projects to deploy it. Both Marshalls, the Marshall Project and Marshall's. I think he should go with that. He should call his projects the Marshall 2.0 projects or something. But there's also it's important to define, what green energy is, because there are things that are on the border. Obviously wind and solar, nobody would deny those are green energy. But there's, geothermal is much less talked about, and there's places in the world that are ideal for geothermal power for heat pumps to be rapidly deployed. We also need to talk about the resilience of green energy, like wind turbines, for example. India and Pakistan are, of course, suffering these ongoing terrible heat waves and really high wet bulb temperatures. The areas will become uninhabitable for humans to live. At slightly higher temperature humidity combination. We're already pushing the sort of thresholds of human survivability in many places, and so we need resilient, steady, guaranteed supplies of electricity during these heat waves to ensure that the air conditioners are working especially in big cities, and there's not rolling power blackouts or power shortages. As Kim Stanley Robinson outlined in his fiction book, the in his recent fiction book, India, if there was massive power outages in India, they would start to have mass casualties, especially in the cities, if they weren't able to operate their air conditioners. But would you count nuclear as green energy? I mean, the Canadian government seems to be pushing small modular reactors, and they say that they'll have these things online by 2028. Although, it's being pushed a lot by the nuclear industry, and we don't hear too much about the development. I mean, we don't have operating small modular reactors at the moment, so how are we going to deploy many of them in 2028, which is sort of the Canadian government plan now? For a while there, natural gas and liquefied natural gas was being touted by the industry as a bridge fuel to the future, bridging between fossil fuels and renewables, allowing renewables to catch up. And they tried to brand it as a renewable energy, renewable resource for a while, and a much clean burning source of fossil fuels. And but of course the leak rates from natural gas are very high, and governments are having another look at the idea of liquefied natural gas. Lots of things are happening, of course, in the energy industry because of the Putin's attack of the Ukraine, and but with oil prices and fossil fuel prices so high now, Russia's actually still getting lots of money coming in from fossil fuels. So the other thing is so would you call small modular reactors? Would you say that that's green energy? There's arguments that it should, and there's arguments that it shouldn't. And as far as Germany, Germany became more dependent on fossil fuels. They used to have, after the nuclear accidents, of course we had, after the tsunami and the nuclear accident in Japan, Germany basically had to rethink about their nuclear plants, and they ended up shuttering very quickly a number of nuclear plants, but then that greatly increased their dependence on coal and fossil fuels, like the natural gas from Russia, etc. So their dependence on Russian energy became much greater once they shuttered quickly the nuclear plants. So if you have nuclear plants, they need to obviously be you don't just shut them down. You need to phase them out over time and make sure hopefully replace them with the renewable energy. But so anyway, I think I've often said that we need to take the I'd like to see militaries if governments declared the climate crisis as an emergency. It's a sort of an attack on our country by the environment. by an angry environment, and we need the military to be used to deploy renewable energies on an emergency basis, to use the technologies from military scientists and engineers to to work on scalability and mass deployment of solar energy, and do it for a few years, and we can make a huge dent. Like we need to get serious about this, and I think that the climate will demand this very soon, because we're definitely heading to global food shortages and famine very, very soon, and that really wakes people up. People need to eat, so this is an existential crisis to humanity, the climate crisis, and the war and effects on supplies, and also the pandemic. All of these things have highlighted how fragile our supply chains are for things like food and any other supplies. And governments are all suddenly starting to worry about hyperinflation and stagnation, where you have no economic growth and extremely high inflation occurring. So they're starting to worry about that, and they're raising interest rates. And we need to stop just responding to things that happen, and to actually be proactive and retool our society to green energy. It's just as simple as that. It's a matter of survival.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Professor David Schumacher, how actually for this green technology, for this green energy, developing nations can develop better policy for this current challenging situation? What we understand from different developing nations, they get different kind of policy from developed worlds. Every few years, like 5 to 10 years, they have to change their policy. So how they can develop better policy for developing sustainable ecosystem?
Yeah, great question. I think all governments, but I think developing country governments actually have the advantage in doing some of this. Before I say what this is, let me explain that comment. In so-called developed countries, there's a status quo that's really hard to overcome. I agree with Marshall saying that we need to take current industries like oil and gas and give them a path to continue their existence, but do it in a greener, better way. That's a big challenge. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it's a big challenge. Your question about developed countries is perhaps there's less inertia with the energy suppliers that are there. Perhaps they are looking for a unique advantage, which is what you need to move forward. Maybe they would be more of the mindset to do that. So this, meaning what I think we need to do, is based on governments encouraging entrepreneurial solutions. Governments should seed the direction. And when I say governments, this is ideally the people through the government saying this is where we want our society to go. We don't want runaway temperatures. We don't want runaway pollution. We don't want these other things. But I do want convenience. I do want to have a comfortable life. I do want to pass on a good environment to the succeeding generations. So with that being expressed through government, that's great. And we need to educate, and we need to push in that direction. But the reason I say entrepreneurship is that's where we can really gain traction, I think, quickly if that's incentivized, because then we turn on ingenuity, we turn on capital resources outside of government. This is where a developing country can really take, for example, if Malaysia was to do this and to start to show the world that they are drastically changing what they're doing as far as energy policy and energy implementation and how that's affecting individuals' lives in that country, clearly other countries in the area and very soon across the globe would see this and want to know how to do that. and would look to follow on that and perhaps maybe even improve on it, which is great too. But I think it takes that entrepreneurial spirit. So let me give you an example of something to take this out of theory and say maybe there's a fact that can be at work here. I mentioned earlier about the space program in my introductory remarks and how 50 years of development there has really led us into a different place than we were when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. Let me say that a large part of that, at least some part of that, had to do with SpaceX, Elon Musk, and other companies that were pushing into that area. Those are entrepreneurial companies. They picked up and took off and went past the stagnation, if you will, of the government bureaucracies that were working in space, that were subject to the whims of congressional or parliamentary budgeting, things of that nature. So being able to push this into an entrepreneurial direction and take advantage of that does two things for those governments. It sets your citizenry up with going in the direction that they want to go. And it also increases revenues, which increases taxation. So we end up with a better tax base for the government, so they can then incentivize even more in the directions that they need to go. I like to talk about near-term possibilities. I like the distant possibilities too. They're great. They keep my eyes high on the horizon. But the near-term possibilities is what we can incentivize with this kind of policy from governments. And I think that can be done especially well in developing countries. I actually think developing countries have the advantage as far as this goes.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher. Mr. Marshall, what is your concluding remarks for today's sessions? And as you discuss about GFANs, these are the organization very active because regularly we communicate with many important organizations, including GFANs. Maybe they are busy, but we do not get proper response from GFANs. I don't know how come they will be helpful for developing nations. Yes, like World Economic Forum, United Nations, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, JICA, they are very active organizations. Are they really contributing for the people, or what's going on?
I think that's a great observation, Sharif, and that's one of the reasons why I am pushing for the World Talent Economy Forum and every one of our members to join forces to get to these folks. GFAN's problem has more to do with corruption than anything else. Not their corruption, but their concern that they have the $130 trillion. And if they give that money to countries in which they're not democratic,
Just one thing I
that's
want
one
to add.
thing.
Sir,
So
one thing
hold on, let me just finish my comment. But I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue on green energy is more about deployment of capital that is available now, and not necessarily through GFANs, but through the Climate Bond Initiative, which has the rules of the road of how to deploy that capital properly. And that's where I think the World Talent Economy Forum can make a big difference. Going after GFANs, they're not a formal organization. That's $130 trillion committed after COP26. But I don't think that's the game. I don't think that's the game we need to play. I think the game we need to play is what David was talking about, is that we and everybody else on this panel, is that we focus not on the big players that can or cannot do whatever their excuses are, but to make the difference now by acting now, by going through the World Talent Economy Forum. We've got a set of talent on this World Talent Economy Forum around the world that you've been able to gather, Sharif, and we need to gather those people and implement the joint venture requirements that are required by the Climate Bond Initiative. In fact, the Climate Bond Initiative just released the fact that it is the number one green finance capability, not GFANs, not Chainlink or any of these other players. Chainlink's down on the rating scale, but on the rating scale right now, number one is the Climate Bond Initiative, which will allow us, when I say us, everybody in the developing world, to acquire those funds and deploy them in the developing world. And that's the name of the game. If we do that, we will be successful. And I believe we will be successful. And that's why I've joined forces with everybody on this panel, together with you, Sharif, to make this happen. I don't want to get into the politics of it. I don't care about the politics. I care about people out there getting better quality jobs, reducing poverty, increasing health. We increase the health if we reduce pollution. Just so you know, right now, as I stated in the earlier round, 400 parts per million to 900 parts per million NOx. No wonder children have asthma. It's not a surprise. The data is in. The science is in. If people want to deny science, that's their problem. If they want to say 2 + 2 = 3, that's their problem, not our problem. We all recognize that 2 + 2 = 4, and we need to proceed forward. So it's what I want to leave as a takeaway for everybody that's watching us is to support the World Talent Economy Forum. Let's not worry about the politics. We've got qualified people in our group that can handle the political end. My end is to get the technology out there, get it deployed, get it financed. And that's what I'm going to help us do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your valuable comments. And you have a lot of experience to handle this kind of organization. Maybe it will be helpful for developing world. But I am from industry. I'm more engaged with entrepreneurial initiative in developing world. I am sorry, long time, even COP26, Dubai Expo, this, that, all of the big forum. I'm sorry about that. It's never helpful for the developing world. I'm sorry. Lot of big things happen, and then they said, hey, developing nations has lot of corruption. But my question is, how come China Belt and Road Initiative become so successful? Even though there are a lot of questions, this is different issues, but we want to see a real progression. Let's say we are discussing about green energy. I know in some countries, uh, China developed a solar project in 9 months, very successful projects. It's a green energy, right? And they invest and they're getting return. So I don't know what does it mean the developing nations trying to advocate that corruption, this and that. If corruption, okay, do not do anything. Just stop it and just stay in your home. But if you want progressions, you have to handle it. You need proper directions. But I'm sorry, I do not get any proper. Personally, last April, I communicate with World Bank or Asian Development Bank or GFANS. I get response from everyone except GFANS. If they have 130 trillion dollars, I don't care. At least my organization never care. We want human progressions. If they are real, if it's a genuine, because we need genuine information for our audience, they should perform. And from my experience, even I helps to grow very, very successful group of companies in developing world. They are very successful. Even example you see yesterday, Daffodil Education Group, last 10 years it's grow most probably one of the best corporation for academic industry. Uh, I do not believe that they get support from all of the GFANs, foreign investment, developing nations money. No, they develop their own business with the local people, with the local people money, with the local organizations. So maybe I'm very honest with you. I'm very honest. I'm very, very honest, because there is a huge complaint for this kind of advocating, especially corruption, this, that, blah, 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 especially what we observe, especially COP26 happening, these GFAS doing most not realistic approach they are taking. Maybe, I'm very honest with you, we have to rethink how we can develop better policy, how we can take more realistic approach. Uh, if China becomes successful, why don't these GFANs with $133 trillion, they cannot be successful? I do not know. But we have
Sharif, to
think,
answer your
yes.
question, you're actually making my point. My point
Yes.
is in total agreement with you. I brought up GFANs it's not my position.
No,
It's
no.
GFAN's
Yeah.
position. I'm not articulating GFANs, and I'm not on their side or against them. All I'm saying is their complaint is the one that I articulated. That doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be dealt with, but that's their, like you said, that's the excuse. I say we don't need excuses. We're on the same page. My point is we need the World Talent Economy Forum. We have a venue, we have a mechanism. There is money out there, not through GFANS, but through the Climate Bond Initiative, in which people understand that there are stringent rules of the road. They don't care about GFANS. What they care about is that we don't do greenwashing. And I do know that we have the mechanism and the talent in the World Talent Economy Forum to actually bring this opportunity to scale in the developing world. And that's my point. My point is everybody needs to get on board together with you. What you just articulated is exactly the point I was trying to make, that we don't have time. We have to act now on our own behalf. Let's not rely on GFANS. Let's not rely on third parties. There is money there. It is available to us. We just need to engage with it and get it done. It's being done. It's being done, by the way, in other parts of the world. Your point about the Chinese, well, the Chinese have their own problems right now. They're down, way down, because of their COVID issues. But they are innovative in their sense, and they do have their Belt and Road system. We have to acknowledge these things, and we can't hide behind statements of other people. That's my point. My point is, I'm in total agreement with you. We need to engage everybody here to go out and make it happen. I'm going to make it happen. You're going to make it happen. Everybody on this panel is going to make it happen.
Yes.
We're all on that panel, but we want people out there to recognize what is available to us. We can do it, and we can do it now. And the sooner we do it, the better. That's my contention.
Exactly. So you
we're
are
on the same page.
Exactly with us and in same page. 24th June, we have a very, very special seminar with Central Bank of Bangladesh and Bank Negara, Central Bank of Malaysia. We are working with them. I want to invite you all. Yes, we will discuss on the climate change related policy, very practical things. We will work with the central bank. So maybe I want to invite GFANS people or the European Investment Bank or all of your expert in our seminar. Then we can go for open dialogue, open discussions, and we can do more initiative for develop more projects. So that's why it will be very, very exclusive event with Central Bank of Bangladesh. They will visit Malaysia. World Talent Economy Forum is their partner. We are launching this event. This is the way we actually working with the developing nations, and I can ensure you many developing nations with their highest authority, with their Prime Minister Office, investment forums, with central bank, with energy ministries, everybody working with World Talent Economy Forum. We want to make it more realistic, more effective for both of us, for developed nations and for the developing worlds. So hopefully all of you will join, and I'm sure you will enjoy our seminar, especially when we work with Central Bank of Bangladesh. And we are inviting Central Bank of Malaysia as well. Mr. Adam, what is your concluding remarks for today's session?
Thank you. I want to agree with what Paul said about the importance of discussions about threats to human existence, existential threats on global scales. It feels like it's one thing after another, and threats are rolled out on a conveyor belt that seems to be increasing speed. The timing of the Russia-Ukraine war was impeccable. It was cleanly almost directly after the COVID restrictions were lifted here in the UK. But the problem with that is that I've noticed is there's been a malaise, a nihilistic malaise that affects lots of ordinary people. I noticed on social media that many people were saying things like, during the time when COVID was in full swing, posting comments like, well, there are too many people on this planet anyway, so a pandemic is a good thing. Thin the herd a bit quite often, and I was seeing these kinds of comments, which I thought was pretty despicable. It has become fashionable to be misanthropic. You could wave it off as dark humor, yes, and if someone said to them, well, are you volunteering then, then they would change their mind. But maybe we don't need every other ordinary person to not be misanthropic, only that the top percentage of industry captains, world leaders, high officers, futurists, and investors to unite on defending against existential risks. And Paul also made a good point about how we can't just turn off reactors and complexes and then disassemble. There needs to be a careful transition period. We might only have one shot at that, and Whenever I see a classical sculpture being destroyed by sledgehammers, it breaks my heart. So we need to apply that same protective mode when it comes to humanity and all human endeavors, because I certainly, I love the human race, and I want us to survive for many more millennia. So this is probably a crucial point to work together.
Thank you. Professor Paul, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Yes, thanks again for these sessions. And Sharif, I don't know if you've ever considered, having the World Talent Economic Forum, maybe whether doing it independently or with the governments of Bangladesh, Malaysia, etc., to attend some of the one of the COP climate conferences. So there's the next one, of course, is going to be in November in Egypt, and I'm planning on attending with the team of people facing future and the Climate Emergency Forum, and my own work, and basically every single day I'm involved in press conferences that are recorded by the UN, and they're on the conference website, etc. And we get quite a bit of traction on the climate emergency issues and so on with them. And if you I don't know if you've looked into attending a COP, but I'd highly recommend that you consider that as a venue for expanding the reach of World Talent Economic Forum.
Thank you. We will do that.
With your contacts in the government and industry and that, I'm sure that you'd find it very useful to expand the scope of the organization by attending conferences, and we could even do some joint conferences if you were able to go to Egypt. And also, I'd like to turn the coin a little bit with yourself, and I'll talk to some of the groups like Facing Future and Climate Emergency Forum, and maybe we can arrange to have you on one of our half-hour programs, for each organization, and interview you basically about what you're doing, what your work is, and what World Talent Economic Forum does to give you more visibility and more viewers, etc.
Thank you, sir.
Things like that. Those would help.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we are happy to do that, because we are trying to engage more with practical world, more with industries and central bank. Even we are doing projects with Singapore government right now. We are taking more visible projects. So definitely, I'm open for learning. The more we engage with this kind of community, we can learn more, we can understand more, because we have many entrepreneurs, many government agencies. They need more support, more collaborations, more help. Maybe we can do that. Even especially, you can see that yesterday, one university with 30,000 students and government agencies with 55,000 employees, they actually collaborate with us. And I want to invite you all, those who want to train the government employees, these youth communities, those who want to do research with us for real project developments, we can work together. And definitely any kind of international organization, if they want to invite us, we want to join, and maybe we can contribute for any kind of development. And I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. We are actually getting very good response from around the world, especially from the developing world. I believe they need more support. I believe, yes, some point they actually join this kind of conference, what you were discussing about COP26 or COP27, but some point they need more knowledge transformation, what I understand. They need more cultural transformations. Maybe for policy development, we can involve more developing nations to understand their situation. This way, maybe we can make more successful progress. That is the area actually World Talent Economy Forum working. And we are individual organizations, but now we are collaborating. We are getting many responses from around Asia Pacific. So hopefully all of your guideline, Professor Paul, Mr. Adam, Mr. Marshall, Mr. David Schumacher's, all of your guideline will be helpful for our grassroots level people, because we are more engaging with the grassroots level people. They need actually your help. They need your support. So thank you everyone for excellent session. It's actually excellent dialogue. Hopefully we will get different audience from different agencies of the government and corporation and academy. And if you have any question, you directly can ask to our honorable speakers. They are very helpful. They are very supportive. So hopefully it will be very effective collaboration for all of us. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye, everyone.
But
Bye.
Bye-bye.